Hello, I'm Jasser. Welcome to Face to Face, our weekly summary of key events shaping the future of Central and Eastern Europe. My guest is, as pretty much always, Michał Broniatowski, Editor-in-Chief at TVP World. Michał, welcome.
Thank you.
So I think we need to come clean on our previous episode because...
Oh, come on, do you have to?
Well, we got a few things right, but let's start with things we got wrong. We got the elections in Poland and Romania the other way around. In Romania, the mainstream candidate who was expected to lose won, Mr. Dan. And in Poland, the second candidate, the Eurosceptic, Mr. Nawrocki, actually came very close to the front runner. So, Romania first. What happened in Romania?
You know, we had a leading candidate, the far-right candidate, who got 40% in the first round, and the other one was 20%. It was hard to believe that he would be able to win. However, he won.
Why?
Because probably the liberal audience in Romania and abroad, in diaspora, showed up at the voting boxes and did what they had to do. Nevertheless, you know, even if we say that Romania continues on its liberal path, we have to remember that the far-right candidate who is against Romania participation in the European Union, who is against supporting Ukraine and is endorsing Putin, he's still capable of winning 47% of the vote in this big country. Romania is the second biggest country in this part of Europe.
But at least he lost. Whereas in Poland, if we can come back to the Polish story, the opposition candidate came almost even with the front runner, Mr. Trzaskowski, the centrist pro-Ukrainian mayor of Warsaw, and Mr. Nawrocki, his opponent, before the second round next week. He is using the anti-Ukrainian rhetoric, and he actually, and the loser of the Romanian election, they got together in Poland a few weeks back. They're from the same family of sort of Eurosceptic parties, if you will.
You know, you are, of course, trying to frighten us.
No, I'm just asking for your comment about what does it mean.
My comment is that it's a pattern of right-wing populist candidates who are underestimated in polls, starting with the US.
But in Romania, he was overestimated in the polls.
Not in the end, yeah.
Okay.
But so this is one thing. I think more dangerous in this first round of Polish elections was not the fact that Mr. Nawrocki finally got, in fact, more or less equal result to the party.
Which supports him, yes,
which
of which he is candidate.
Yes, and it's around 30%. What is really reason to be concerned is that all far-right candidates, real far-right, anti-establishment, populist, anti-Semitic, anti-Ukrainian, you name it, got in total around 25%. It's even more than alternative for Deutschland.
The far-right German party.
In last election. So I'd say that what we face in the second round is that the supporters of far-right will in gremio vote for Mr. Nawrocki.
A week is a long time in politics, and it's still...
Yes, especially in Poland.
Yes, especially in Poland. Last time we spoke, last week, I remember distinctly that you flatly refused to speak about the consequences, potential consequences of Mr. Nawrocki's win. So, but a lot of Poland's neighbors in the region, but also in wider Europe, are concerned. So, are there reasons to be concerned, or is it overblown?
The reasons to concern is this mobilization of far right, which are outside the mainstream, which is not good for a country of the importance and size as Poland. On the other hand, if Nawrocki becomes president, I don't think it changes very much for Polish foreign policy, because the president is not able to influence foreign...
Due to limited constitutional powers.
His constitutional rights...
It's interesting that Mr. Nawrocki keeps talking about Ukraine a lot. He committed to this far-right manifesto that he would never sign Ukraine's accession to NATO, which is actually a departure from Law and Justice, his party's previous line, because Law and Justice...
I think he's politicking before the election, because his argument for not allowing Ukraine into NATO is that he thinks that in the war situation and in hesitancy here and there is no point in pressing for this.
But the paradox is...
But when this thing comes to... because the parliament has to approve ratify it, and he needs to sign it later on.
Well, we've seen examples of his predecessor, his current president, refusing to sign things even though parliament did.
Yes, but you know, in this case, his argument about this being uncertain or dangerous for NATO would not be valid, because if NATO decides...
What I find more interesting is that he's contradicting the traditional policy of Law and Justice of saying...
Because he wants to win elections, okay?
I understand, but it's still...
People who
right.
Who cares in Poland about future of Ukraine and NATO? I mean, we care.
Well, I think it's interesting that you do not talk about this issue of, let's say, cohabitation if Mr. Nawrocki becomes president, which has paralyzed...
It will be dishabitation.
Okay.
There will be no cooperation, the same as with the current president. Polish president cannot put forward and impose his will
on
Parliament in positive way, but he can play a negative role, which is he can veto, and he cannot probably, for example, he may refuse to sign in ambassadors, which is the case now.
Right. Well, if only that, but you know, there's important legislation. So you know, there is a certain paradox here, because you know, Poland is internationally perceived as this poster child of successful post-communist transition. The economy is booming. The country is becoming really important inside the European Union. The Economist, a storied magazine, put Poland on the front cover this week. And at the same time, the situation is so fragile, because basically, if Mr. Nawrocki wins, we can expect policy paralysis, effectively.
No, I wouldn't say policy paralysis. It's
domestic policy paralysis?
Domestic.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about foreign policy. I was talking about economic agenda, reforms.
It's a major problem for the ruling coalition that they will not be able to push through the reforms they would like to introduce, including the law on media. Yes, it is a very big danger, but there's no danger, I would say, for the rule of law in Poland. It'll be more difficult to straighten the damages made by the previous government, but he will not be able, the new president, if it is Nawrocki, he wouldn't be able to impose some breaches of rule of law, which was, every day.
But some analysts are speculating that this could even lead to the collapse of the government and early elections.
It may weaken the coalition. All these members of the coalition, they understand that if there are elections, they lose. And they have no chance of staying in the government.
Parliament. So the mobilization of deputies, deputies usually prefer not to hold early elections. They they do it only when they're sure that they can win them.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, moving on to another subject. We did get one thing right, actually you did. I didn't, but you did get one thing right, which, namely is that President Trump was forced to admit that Vladimir Putin, apparently, that's what we hear, that he told European leaders that Vladimir Putin is, surprise, surprise, not ready for peace.
He was cheating himself, and he knew very well that he was that it was wrong to say that Ukraine started the war, that
that Biden was responsible for it.
Biden is responsible for it, or that
he still says that,
Yeah, but this is for domestic consumption. That Zelensky is a dictator who doesn't want elections and things like that. This rhetoric is brought him to a defeat because I think that his strategic goal was to weaken, if not dismantle, this axis of evil, which includes China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. Russia is feeding them with modern technology, military technology, and it gets back from Iran.
I think most of the Chinese military technology is now stolen from the West rather than from Russia.
Yes, but rockets, rocket science, things like that.
But at the end of this day, okay.
And he wanted to lure Russia out
away from China,
away from China, using this tactics. This strategic goal. It was supposed to be achieved through
quick peace in Ukraine, some kind of a deal, returning to business,
playing in the court of Russia.
I don't know if you noticed, but the EU and also Chancellor Merz wants to exclude the possibility of reviving Nord Stream pipeline, which was so emblematic of this dependency on Russian deliveries, to prevent the possibility of the Americans and the Russians rebuilding Nord Stream. Did you notice that? The history is just...
and Mr. Merz is the representative of the same party
that built the Nord Stream,
which was
so they are
run for
sides.
16 years by a chancellor, Mrs. Merkel, who was continuously insisting that Nord Stream is an economic and business project and nothing to do with politics, while it was really strategic project by Mr. Putin, and she was absolutely aware of it.
She was aware of it, yes. But it's interesting that we have now this reversal, that Germany used to be the bad boy of the whole thing, Ukraine-wise, and now it seems that Mr. Trump has swapped places with Chancellor Merkel and then Chancellor Scholz.
Yeah.
Just imagine Chancellor Scholz, the previous German Chancellor, would say things such as Donald Trump says on regular basis about Ukraine, Russia, and so on and so forth. There would be such an outcry.
Suddenly Mr. Merz is saying that he wants to spend 5% of GDP on
So now we have the real Zeitenwende in Germany. Anyway, let's move on, because it turns out that one result of this is that the Americans surprisingly joined the G7 statement saying, sanctions on Russia are possible.
Hold on.
Freezing Russian assets should continue. And we're talking about 200 billion, mostly in Europe. And Europe is sort of pushing for that. We just saw the 16th package of sanctions, I think, and the 17th package is being prepared. And it seems the Americans are, for the time being, at least on board.
It's hard to say where they are, because...
they signed a statement with other G7 countries.
The statement was talking originally about further support of Ukraine. And now it is limited to further ramping up sanctions, which means we know for about 10 years now, more than 10 years, since 2014, that sanctions, there were numerous sanctions against Russia, are not very helpful. So, as long as they don't decide, for example, to free this 300 billion euros in Russian assets that have been blocked 3 years ago, nothing will change. They are making little decisions here and there. 17 times they were introducing several sanctions, and Russians don't look to be very bothered about it.
Yes, but we still have on the table.
Not only that. He, further support is much more. Talking about everything, about helping Ukraine. Here we are just in the text. We have further ramping up sanctions.
But look.
But also, sorry.
Okay, carry on.
The usual language of G7 until now was that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is illegal. This time they only said that it is continued brutal war.
I understand that, but only a week ago there were even doubts that such a statement would be produced. What's more, you have the bill, the draft bill going through the Senate, proposed by Senator Lindsey Graham, who claims to have President Trump's ear.
It's bipartisan.
It's bipartisan.
Supported by 80 senators.
Well, here you go. And that's actually a very meaty sanctions package. So I think the real test will come whether that bill goes through the Senate, which for President Trump, maybe he will say, I did my best, I tried, Vladimir, I gave you a chance, you wasted it, look, the Senate, there's nothing I can do about it.
I think you just described the game.
Well, here you go.
Played by Americans, of course, because he as you know, he is master of the deal.
So he admitted that he is a master.
Well, he claims. So he's trying to play. And this is one of the elements of the game, of the play. With Putin, he's allowing his colleagues, Republican colleagues in the Senate, in the U.S. Senate, to introduce this.
Right.
To use some leverage on Putin.
Okay, so the ball is still in play. Let's move on. We only have little time, so could you briefly tell us what is the significance of the UK, United Kingdom, signing a deal with the EU? It's not rejoining the EU yet, but is the UK coming back?
UK has decided not to come back, but to move on parallelly, to friendly relations. It's now 10 years after, almost 10 years after the referendum. It's 5 years after, or 6 years after the final decision to leave. And it was always, it was never possible to agree on some sort of trade, whatever. There were no agreements between EU and Britain. Suddenly it became possible, and the key issue, they agreed on several horn issues, like, for example, fisheries and so on. But the main thing is that Britain got a promise of access to this 150 billion euro loan program to support military investments, to support weapons, and so on, so on. So this shows that both sides, Britain and Europe, want to work together for mutual benefit, which changes a bit this vision of Brussels saying they did it, they have to pay for it. And,
right. So you have to admit Mr. Trump achieved something. They brought the UK and Europe together. You don't have to comment on that.
Agree.
You agree? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for watching Face to Face. See you next week, and stay on with TVP World for more news and analysis.